in this lesson, we'll talk about hiding an object's UV seams. So anytime we do a UV layout on an object, it's going to have a seam somewhere. So oftentimes you'll find that there are places where you can hide that seam. Now sometimes if it's on a character or something like that, you'll hide the seam underneath the hairline or along the back. In this case though, we'll work on using this lamp, and we'll use a texture to apply to it. So let's start by creating some UVs for this. So I'm going to go in and to the panel, into our UV texture editor. All right. And so we can do an auto map with this. Another way to do it would just be to go to create UVs and do a cylindrical map. That would work too, to get a good, start on it. You can come in here and kind of project it like that. You can also do, again, an auto map. That would give you the caps as well. The other method, you'd have to kind of project those caps separately. And so let's decide where we want this seam. Okay, so let's put the seam kind of right in the center, right in this kind of groove here. It sort of makes sense. And so I've selected that entire edge loop. Let's cut, and then we'll just remember that that is where our seam is. So we won't attach anything right there. So everything that we're going to do is going to be on this side for this piece. So we'll select down and then select this edge here. And I don't want to have anything on this part selected, so click over on that. And so again, keeping track of the seam, that's the seam right over here on this side. So we can come in here and attach our next piece. And come in here and kind of sew that together. Now we can take this and unfold it, which will kind of clean that up. Now we can come in here and grab these edges, unfold that, and kind of rotate it a little bit. And let's do the same thing here, where we'll kind of come in and select all those edges on that side. Now we know this is the seam, but we also know that there's a little piece in here that we need to add, so we'll just select those edges. And then let's grab that side and unfold it. And then some of these you can kind of come in and figure this out manually. We'll move this a bit so you can see there's a little edge right in there that we can bring together. So now we can come in and unfold this, and we'll leave the caps separate. Now let's apply our texture. So we're going to go to our hypershade. Let's create a new material. I'm just going to create a blend. Let me drop it onto the object. We'll go into color and file, and let's add that wood texture that we looked at earlier. So that's going to be, come down here, and let's find the wood. I think it's going to be actually in the raw folder. So that this wood rough is what we want to add. It has all this nice grain on it. So we'll go ahead and open that up. Add that into the color. Select our object, and there you can see the UVs on the object. Let's turn on our hardware texturing. All right, so right now the UVs and the texture are going in the wrong direction. And so let's take these, we'll kind of move them off here, and we'll concentrate more on this piece. So the seam that we want to hide is right here. You can see it's very obvious when the texture is oriented this way because it breaks right there. So this is where we need to think about the real world construction of our object. So in this case, it is a piece of wood that has the grain flowing in this direction. We see all of these sort of gaps here. So visually on the texture, there's already a break happening. And so those are good places to hide our texture seams. So let's grab our UVs, and we'll kind of rotate this a little bit. And let's pull this first one up to this crack right there. Now you can see that as we come across here, we start to get this coming at an angle. So this is where we need to, again, modify our UVs based on the texture that we're using. So let's use our lattice and kind of pull this up. And we want the texture, or we want the UVs to sort of flow in the same direction as our texture. So you can see that happening there. And we can also start to come in and hide the seams a little bit more. And let's do that by selecting these, and then we can use our lattice, and we can kind of pull these points into one of these little cracks here, so that both sides end on a crack. Then you get something that visually makes more sense. It looks like an actual break in the texture, and that's a perfect place to put a break in the UVs. And we can do the same thing, down here. Just make sure that this ends up in this dark area, kind of right down in here, and up into that area, so that when we view it, we don't really see a visual break. It just looks like part of the texture. And it actually makes sense that there maybe was a crack inside of that little area that's sticking in there. But that's actually a seam in the UVs. If that were out in the middle of the texture somewhere, it would be a little bit easier to see. So you just want to kind of think about the real world breaks in your textures and how you can incorporate that into the seams, because you are definitely going to have seams on your UVs. There's no getting around that. It's just a question of where you want to place those. On characters, again, you place them kind of in inconspicuous areas. In things that are manufactured, there will be plenty of spots for you to break those UVs, because those pieces are normally manufactured in a specific way. They're not usually created out of one solid piece of something. So just think about those spots where you can mimic the construction or the structure of a real-world object to hide your seams. Okay, think about on fabric, think about how the pieces are attached together, and then put your seams there, if that makes sense. So the next thing that we'll do is take a look real quick at modifying textures with the 3D Paint tool.